And next time, in this part of Sentimental Journey, I'm looking at the career and music of Jim Davidson, who perhaps more than anybody else in Australia in the 30s was the maestro who delivered the music.
But no hearts and flowers play your lilting melody, ragtime, jazz time, sweet. Any old thing to help me ease the pain that solitude can bring. He used to like waltzes, so please don't play a waltz. He danced divinely, and I loved him so. But there I go tonight. I mustn't think of him. No more memories. So play tonight. I must forget music, maestro, please.
Music, Maestro Please, that great hit of 1938, the ABC Dance Orchestra under the leadership of Jim Davidson. Jim Davidson was born in Sydney in 1902, and after leaving school at the age of 14, he worked as a clerk with Lever Brothers, the soap manufacturers, for 6 years. But then, as luck would have it, he found that the lure of entertainment was too strong to resist. In 1922, young Jim made his vaudeville bow as a percussionist, dancer and comic under the auspices of New Era stage presentations. And by 1928, he was playing drums with Jimmie Elkins at the Wentworth Hotel in Sydney. On October the 21st of that year, the Elkins band broke up, and a few of its members, including Jim Davidson and trumpet player Jim Gussie, went to join pianist Jack Woods at the Ambassador's restaurant in Sydney as a 5-piece band. Jim tapes up the story.
It was a plush, well-furnished alabaster and marble plush mine. And they, in the 1930s, we had a fire and consequently no job. In due course, we went across the street to the Ginger Jar. That's in the arcade. I think it's Angus and Coots Arcade. And we played there every afternoon and 4 nights a week. Our best business, of course, being Depression time, was every afternoon, and the out-of-work young people then gave us full houses. You could get a cup of tea and a sandwich and dance all afternoon for $1 shilling. And one afternoon there was a little excitement as the pianist leaned forward, Gordon Rawlinson, and said, "Isn't that Mr. Bendrot across there in one of the loges?" 5 heads swiveled as one. All the men in the band heard him. And of course it was Mr. Bendrot. Well, when I got home to my flat that afternoon, telephone rang and Mr. Bendrot asked me if I'd like to go and see him.
And the upshot was that the band opened at the Palais Royal with 10 members within the next 6 months. Jim Davidson Orchestra in 1933 with 42nd Street. With the Davidson Orchestra on the bandstand, the winter season at the Palais Royal was one of the most successful it had ever seen. And on Thursday nights, the band broadcast over station 2UE.
Thursday night was our night off. It was a slack night at the Palais, and Mr. Bendrod decided that he would use it commercially. So, as part of our weekly chores, we were taken to the 2UE, and Mr. Bendrod announced. We used to play mostly requests, and the request came something like this. They'd be jiving around the bandstand on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the voice would yell from the floor, "Shuffle off to Buffalo on Thursday, Jim."
Oh, off we're gonna shuffle off to Buffalo. Such happy hours close by your side. The honeymoon in store is one that you'll adore. I'm gonna take you for a ride. I'll go home and get my panties, you go home and get your scanties, and away we'll go. Ooh, off we're gonna shuffle off to Buffalo. To Niagara in the sleeper, there's no honeymoon that's cheaper, and the train goes slow. Ooh, off we're gonna shuffle off to Buffalo. Someday the stork may pay a visit and bring a little souvenir, just a little cute, what is it? But we'll discuss that later, dear. For a little silver quarter we can have the Pullman porter, turn the lights down low. Ooh, off we're gonna shuffle off to Buffalo.
Jim's 1933 recording of Shuffle Off to Buffalo, which, with the other side, 42nd Street, sold 30,000 copies and stayed in the Regal Zonophone catalogue for 10 years. The vocal was by the unmistakably Aussie voices of the so-called Rhythm Boys. I asked Jim who they were exactly.
Tony, you're pushing my mind back an awful long way. But I'll give you a secret. I'll tell it to you as a matter of fact. Those Rhythm Boys were Peter and Dudley Cantrell. Peter played alto sax, Dudley Cantrell solo trombone and orchestrations, Jim Gussie, and me. And no wonder it sounded as having an Aussie flavour. We all were.
Sitting in the dark, don't we get a thrill? Acting kind of still. Sitting in the dark, what does the daddy do? First we start to kiss. Then we sit inside. We get feeling hard. Sitting in the dark, what does the daddy do? sent your ma and pa up there to bed. We talked the clock, I'll book the hole. Then when everything is quiet overhead, the lights go out and we're alone, sitting in the dark. Never say a boo, but there's lots to do. Sitting in the dark, what-da-da-da-dee-do.
Those June 1933 recordings by the New Palais Royal Orchestra under Jim Davidson on the Red and Green Regal Zonophone label were so successful that Jim was invited back into the studios of the Columbia Record Company at regular intervals for the rest of the year. Most of the material was fairly commercial, since the recording executives, as usual, were more interested in sales than art. Nevertheless, there were some sides that have a pretty jazzy feel to them. What was Jim's own view of jazz?
What percussionist who started life in his musical career as a percussionist hasn't a feel for the beat? Of course, that's the only thing I collected when I was a young man, 17, 18. The red nickels and the 5 pennies, the cotton pickers on Brunswick, they were my absolute overlords. The records and me used to spend most of my off nights. I put the record on and play to them. And I only felt the riffs and the beats and the licks of the jazz men of the 20s and 30s. If there isn't a jazz beat in dance music, it just isn't.
After making that recording of original Dixieland one-step in November 1933, the Davidson Band moved to Melbourne to play a 6-month stint at the St Kilda Palais, still under contract to J.C. Benrod. The Thursday night broadcast continued, this time on the station 3AW, and by April the 20th, 1934, they'd returned to the Sydney Palais. Well, the following week, they were back in the Columbia studios with John Warren as featured vocalist.
When the sweet magnolias bloom again, I'll be coming back to you, and I hope that I'll find room again in the heart that once I knew. Oh, the feeling grows stronger for someone I miss, and I can't wait much longer for yesterday's kiss. How I pray it may be soon again, when the sweet magnolias bloom again. When the sweet magnolias bloom
When the Sweet Magnolias Bloom Again, with John Warren as the featured vocalist in 1934. After another successful season at the Sydney Palais Royal, Jim Davidson took the band back to Melbourne. The contract with J.C. Benrod expired on January the 1st, 1935, and while he was in Melbourne, Jim was approached by a certain Major Conda, and it was a meeting which was to shape his career for the next 5 years.
Major Conda was the then general manager of the ABC. That's before Sir Charles Moses. And I was tipped off that he would like to see me privately when next I was up in town. Sydney, I mean. In due course I did, and we had a talk. And the upshot of that little talk was that I found myself back in Melbourne as the ABC Dance Band Melbourne. And that's how the ABC band, dance band started. Not as a lot of people think in Sydney. It didn't.
San Francisco, well, they didn't quite make it there, but a report in the Melbourne Herald dated the 16th of March 1936 suggested that Jim Davidson had received an offer to take the band to England from Ken Hall, a London booking agent. According to the report, he'd been guaranteed £400 a week for a 14-piece band. Anyway, for one reason or another, the tour never came off, and the band moved back to Sydney for another season at the Palais Royal, opening on May the 1st, 1936. Later that year, the ABC stepped in with a 26-week contract, and Jim started broadcasting over 2FC on October the 6th. At this stage, the members of the band were Jim Gussie, Ray Tarrant, Harry Patton on trumpets, Stuart Dawkins, Tom Stevenson on trombones, Frank McLaughlin, Chick Donovan, Les McGrath, Bob Johnson, saxes, Gordon Rawlinson and Wally Portingale on pianos, Billy Doyle, piano accordion, Alan Barr guitar, Orm Wills bass, and, of course, Jim Davidson on drums. However, soon, the pressure of work forced Jim to hang up the drumsticks.
We were on the air every night, except Sunday. We closed the station Monday to Saturday. I had to make up my own programs. We rehearsed 4 afternoons a week. There was a great deal of administrative work to do, and I just didn't have time. So Tommy Stevenson took over from me, and I just threw my weight about.
For every time it rains, pennies from heaven. Don't you know each cloud contains pennies from heaven? You'll find your fortune falling all over town. Be sure that your umbrella is upside down. Trade them for a package of sunshine and flowers. If you want the things you love, you must have showers. So when you hear it thunder, don't run under a tree. There'll be pennies from heaven for you and me. Find your fortune falling all over town. Be sure that your umbrella is upside down. So when you hear it thunder, don't run under a tree. There'll be pennies from heaven for you and me.
A smooth Davidson arrangement that embodies the Davidson ABC sound of 1936. But that sound could swing like the best when it wanted to, perhaps simply because the ABC Dance Orchestra was literally the best. Were there any particular musical influences?
Most of the coloured orchestras were, they were our guiding light. Cab Calloway, Count Basie was just beginning to pop. I modelled, being a percussionist in those days, I modelled myself on Chick Webb. And we liked very much Fletcher Henderson's scores, but the people seemed to like Jimmy and Tommy Dorsey, Harry James, so we sort of had an easy policy musically.
McLaughlin,
Where
up through the Rhine,
falls the dew,
on the blue belt of Scotland,
and 'twas there
I love the lassie,
that Annie Laurie
when the camels are coming,
gave me
in the Highlands.
her promise.
You take the high road and we'll take the low.
Yes, she promised she'd go swinging through the ride.
With the wee Dr. Doris,
When she did, she made old Scotland swing on high.
holding on high,
And for Bonnie,
Bonnie Mary Almagar,
no Bonnie and Dory,
we kept the promise true.
I would lay me doing and see. Ho 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 de ho ho. Ho ho ho, the Campbells are coming.
Ho, 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 ho,
The Campbells are coming. The Campbells are coming.
ho, 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 ho.
But they'll never, while there's Heather, swing like Annie Laurie through the ride.
Annie Laurie with the excellent Alice Smith, who was the band's female vocalist until the war years. Listening to Alice on Jim Davidson's records, I sometimes get the feeling there's a bit of Ella Fitzgerald in there somewhere. Well, Jim considered it in a rather different light.
Alice, like lots of good artists, are extremely conscious of any kind of a performer. And she was such a consummate artist vocally that if a song had a certain timbre or a certain character, she knew just how to sing that to suit the song and to suit her. And she had so many facets as a vocalist that sometimes you'd bet it wasn't she. And other times somebody had influenced her, so of course it could have been Ella Fitzgerald, but it could equally have been a dozen others, because Alice was such a good artist that she knew exactly what to do with the song, and they were all in her head. She didn't mimic anybody.
Like the willows I sigh,
Pretty lady,
oh my cabin of dreams. At the ending of day,
a perfect day,
I start wending my way with a heart feeling gay.
top of the world,
Oh my cabin of dreams, swinging down through the lane, singing love's old refrain. I'll be home once again, tapping my window
tapping on your
pane.
window pane,
When I open the door,
cabin of dreams,
I'm in heaven once more with the one I adore.
I love you, dear.
In my cabin of dreams. In my cabin of dreams.
Alice Smith and Cabin of Dreams. Well, on the 29th of April 1936, the orchestra travelled to Orange for the opening of ABC station 2CR with hillbilly singer Tex Morton and Father Sidney McEwen, who was then touring Australia. Sometime during 1937, the band made a short for Fox Movietone Films, which was part of the Australian Dancing Championships and featured 3 minutes of the band playing. And in August of that year, they gave a concert at Sydney Town Hall, apart from their other radio duties. And in November, they toured Brisbane, Toowoomba and Newcastle, finding themselves back in Sydney on the 17th of November. Jim was obviously a stickler for good vocalists. If you look and listen to Alice and John Warren and Dick Cranbourne, and certainly part of the Davidson appeal was Jim's ability to blend the sound of the band with the sound of the vocalist. As Jim pointed out, he might well have written that post-war song called You've Got to Have Heart.
If there's feeling in the lyric of a song, the same feeling must be matched with the tune of the song. And I used to seek soloists who had that strong appeal in their instrumental work as the vocalist had in his or her work. You can hear it very much in John Warren and Alice Smith.
In the Chapel in the Moonlight, Alice Smith and John Warren. Well, on February the 2nd, 1938, the orchestra left on another tour. This time it was a 39-day tour embracing 12 centres and giving 23 concerts in all. Centres visited included Wagga, Albury, Melbourne, Hobart, Launceston, Devonport, Burnie, Ballarat, Adelaide, Broken Hill, Orange, Bathurst, and finally back to Sydney by early April. Touring with the band were Horidagi and Bob Dyer. At this stage, Billy Doyle left the band after this tour, and Harry Patton was replaced by Norm Litt. Charles Bone on violin took the place of Leo Smith, and the next recording session was made up of items by the Small Dandies group, but the full orchestra did record as well.
So you met someone who set you back on your heels. Goody, goody. So you met someone and now you know how it feels. Goody, goody. So you gave him your heart too, just as I gave mine to you. And he broke it in little pieces. Now how do you do? So you lie awake just singing the blues all night. Goody, goody. So you think that love's a barrel of dynamite. Yes, you had it coming to you, and you don't like it, do you? Goody, goody for him. Goody, goody for him. Goody, goody for me. Goody, goody for you. And I hope you're satisfied, you rascal, you. Goody, goody. Goody, goody. Bombs down. Goody, goody for you. Goody, goody for him.
Goody, goody indeed. John Warren in slightly different mood there, with the band backing him vocally and instrumentally. During the 1938 broadcast, there were various bands under Jim Davidson's leadership on the air. The Jazz Trio, which featured Keith Atkinson on clarinet, Wally Portingale and Jim Davidson on drums. Then there was a sort of gypsy unit, the Tzigana Band, with Jim Gussie, Frank McLaughlin, Chick Donovan and Bob Atkinson, with two pianos and rhythm. Then there was the Swing Tet, Norm Litt or Lynn Miller doing trumpets, George Trevere, Keith Atkinson and rhythm, and then there was the rumba unit with one of the trumpets with rumba rhythm. Meanwhile, the recording sessions continued, and on June the 2nd, 1938, the band recorded a composition by pianist Wally Portingale called Marmalade. Wally Portingale's composition Marmalade, recorded in 1938. The best-selling records in Australia for 1938 were Alan Jones in first place, with Jim Davidson in second, third, fourth and fifth place. On January the 20th, 1939, there was a 2-week stage show at the State Theatre in Sydney, with a reported payment of £400 a week.
Part of my contract with the ABC that once a year I was able to go out and get a feel of the public, and Union Theatres contracted us to do some stage shows in Sydney and Melbourne. And we did a special feature stage show on the State Theatre Sydney, and then went to Melbourne and repeated it again on what was then known as the Union Theatre circuit.
And one of the hits from that stage show at the State Theatre in Sydney was Alice Smith and the band with A Tisket, a Tasket.
Please listen, it's awful bad, please listen. I'm awful sad, please help me, I'm singing the blues. A tisket, a brown and yellow biscuit. I sent a letter to my mommy, on the way I dropped it.
She dropped it, yes, on the way she dropped it.
A little galley picked it up and put it in her pocket. She was trucking on down the avenue without a single thing to do. She was pegging all around when she spied it on the ground.
Oh!
The tisket, she took my yellow biscuit, and if she doesn't bring it back, I think that I shall die. Don't return it, I don't know what I'll do. Oh dear, I wonder where my biscuit can be.
So-da-wing, 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 so-da-wing.
Oh dear, I wish that little girl I could see.
So-da-wing, 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 so-da-wing.
Alice Smith fronting the band there with A Tisket, a Tasket, recorded November 3rd, 1938. Well, early in 1939, Larry Adler was touring Australia, and he made a couple of records with the Davidson ABC Dance Orchestra. And I asked Jim how that came about.
Purely and simply through the Columbia Record Company, do you see. Larry came to Australia. I'm not sure whether he came under the aegis of the ABC or whether it was a theatrical venture. But Columbia Records wanted him to record, and as I was the only recording band for Columbia at the time, we were naturally put together by the recording company. That's how I first met Larry, and we made the Blue Danube and the Second Hungarian Rhapsody.
Second Hungarian Rhapsody, the ABC Dance Orchestra under Jim Davidson, with the connivance of Larry Adler, a cooperation which earned Jim a gold fountain pen from Larry. A bare 6 months after that recording was made on the 14th of March 1939, rather less cheerful things were going out over the airwaves on Sydney radio.
Here is the Prime Minister of Australia, the Right Honourable R.G. Menzies.
Fellow Australians, it is my melancholy duty to inform you officially that in consequence of a persistence by Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war upon her, and that as a result, Australia is also at war. No harder task can fall to the lot of a democratic leader than to make such an announcement. Great Britain and France, with the cooperation of the British dominions, have struggled to avoid this tragedy. They have, as I firmly believe,
Going brother, left, right, left. Going in brother, left, right, left. Come on and join up. Come on, your country is calling. Let's go, brother. Left, right, left. You'll be another. Don't be left. Don't be crazy. You'll find it easy. Come on, falling, brother. Left, right, left. Sing 'em up, sing 'em up, sing 'em up. Son of a gun, be a son of a gun with a gun. You're in this fight, it's yours and mine, and you'll feel fine as you swing into line. Fall in, brother.
The new, rather more military-orientated sound of Jim Davidson after war began. We'll be hearing all about that and more songs of that type and other types next time when we look at the life and music of Jim Davidson. Special thanks to Mike Sutcliffe for research and for our nap theme of Radio Archives, and producer Peter McCormack. This is Tony Baldwin saying good night.